Hey everybody, welcome back for session 2 of the plenaries. I'm Braylon and I'm going to be introducing our next speaker, Lauren Gibson. She is a climate change champion. When she was in middle school, she started a By Youth for Youth program that provided students in central Indiana with funding and the mentorship they needed to lead their own environmental projects. She then moved on to Stanford and received a master's degree in environmental communications and a bachelor's degree in earth systems. She constantly speaks for young people and about their ability to make a difference. She currently works at NOAA's Office of Education, where she supports youth engagement activities. Please help me give a warm welcome to Lauren Gibson.
Thank you, Braylon. Hello, everyone. How was lunch? Good? Everyone's still going to stay awake for me? Good. I'll try to keep you awake. Like Braylon said, my name is Lauren Gibson. I work for NOAA's Office of Education. Is this working all right? Okay. And I'm also the founder of the Carmel Green Tea Microgrant Program. Seems to be going in and out. A By Youth for Youth grant program in central Indiana that funds youth-led environmental projects. I'm super happy to be here today and talking with all of you. This sort of Youth Climate Summit is what started me in environmental work, so it feels very full circle to be coming back. Planning for this talk, I was trying to figure out how to frame this conversation, and I kept seeing a lot of 10s pop up. The Adirondack Youth Climate Summit is celebrating its 10-year anniversary this year, which is super exciting, 10 years of this. Coincidentally, my nonprofit program in Indiana is also celebrating 10 years this year, which is super exciting. And I'm, therefore, celebrating 10 years of youth environmental work myself. So today, I'm excited to share with you 10 lessons that I've learned and want to pass on after my 10 years of youth environmental work. But, of course, it wouldn't be realistic to start telling my story about the environment when I started working with the environment, what led me there. I wasn't magically handed the keys to a nonprofit and told to go have fun. There was so much that went on behind the scenes that helped me get there, and it starts a bit earlier than a decade ago. And starting the story earlier means cute baby photos. So I was super lucky to be born into a loving family living a comfortable life in suburban Indiana. My parents had lived as Peace Corps volunteers in Costa Rica for 2 years, and that love of adventure and nature that they had really made its way into how they parented me and my siblings. I grew up splashing around streams, running around local parks, and staring incessantly out my window looking at local birds. I was that weird kid who, as a 6-year-old, was carrying around a bird field guide wherever I went, taped together from looking at it too much. I was just happiest when I was on my own, quietly observing birds and trying to identify them. I really credit my parents, especially my mom, with instilling this love for nature in me early on, and I recognize that not everyone has that privilege growing up to be born into such a loving family and have those opportunities that I did. In addition to being awesome mentors themselves, my parents also encouraged me to find other amazing mentors. This is my dog, Cricket, that I grew up with. How many people here grew up with a pet? Wow, that's awesome. Learning from an animal was one of the keystones of my childhood. This animal taught me so much about caring for others, really loving another creature, and it was the perfect friend for a quiet, animal-loving person like I was growing up. And in addition to letting me have the opportunity to learn from pets like this, my parents humored me when in 3rd grade I decided I wanted to train llamas. So I hope this is the first time that a llama in a pirate costume has made its way into the Wild Center. This is really a thing that people do in Indiana, and I did it for 6 years. So llamas are more like cats than dogs in personality. They're a little difficult to train. So working with these animals for 6 years really taught me a lot about patience and slow and steady progress that has made its way into my environmental work and my daily life since then. It also made it super clear to me that animals, regardless of species, do have independent personalities, very distinct wants that they made clear through spitting sometimes. And I loved every single one of their personalities. So when in 5th grade, it came time to do a report about some sort of issue, my first thought was, how can I make this about animals? But I didn't really know what sort of issues animals were facing. So, like any smart 5th grader, I went and asked my mom. And she told me about this whole climate change thing. She handed me an article that had a picture that we're all painfully familiar with, that polar bear on a melting ice cap. I remember reading the article and asking my mom if global warming was really a big enough issue to do my 5th grade report on. You know, I wanted it to be about a very serious, long-lasting problem, and I just wasn't sure that climate change was that problem. It was something invisible. You know, you couldn't see your emissions, you couldn't see the impact you were having on animals. But my mom was patient with me and urged me to read on and decide for myself. I did keep reading. And I did end up doing my 5th grade report on polar bears and climate change. This was the exact photo that was on my cover page. I was very proud of it. But as I read more about climate change and learned more and more about the impacts that people were having on the planet, I started to feel incredibly disheartened. This was clearly a big enough issue to do my 5th grade report on, and it was much more than that, as we all know now. But I was only in 5th grade. How could I make a difference for animals on the other side of the planet who were being affected by this global issue that was so, so much bigger than me? At the same time that climate change was really hitting me hard, especially because I was deeply sensitive and very, very much in love with all of the animals, I was transitioning into middle school. Who had like a lovely, flowery middle school transition? Anybody? Yeah, neither did I. I was struggling pretty hard getting into middle school. I wasn't in any classes with my friends, and I suddenly learned that there was such a thing as cool and uncool, which I wasn't aware of in elementary school, apparently. And apparently also my multicolored stretch pants and quiet, very serious nature did not put me in the cool category. I started having some really serious problems with talking with classmates. I was shy as it was, but with this whole trying to be cool, trying to fit in thing, it just became very difficult even to talk and ask to borrow a pencil. I really panicked when I had to talk to anyone new, which was a problem because everyone in my class was new. And I nearly burst into tears trying to invite people to my 6th grade birthday party. It was really a struggle. And as my confidence for myself was dropping, so was my belief in my ability to do anything to make a change for the planet. If I couldn't even talk to the person sitting next to me, how was I going to save the polar bears a world away? Thankfully, at the same time, another fateful school report came into my life. In 7th grade, my teacher asked the class to write an essay about someone who inspired them, someone they might want to be like when they grew up. Again, I wasn't sure what to do, so I talked to my mom. This is a trend throughout my life. Mama's always right. So I asked my mom if she knew of any woman, especially a female scientist, who was doing work to save animals. And she pointed out this magnificent woman, Dr. Jane Goodall. Does anyone know about Jane Goodall? Maybe? Yes. That makes me so happy. So for those of you who don't know, Dr. Jane Goodall came to prominence in a time when nobody was studying chimpanzees, the animal she ended up studying, let alone a woman, let alone a young woman, let alone a young woman without any scientific training, and let alone a young woman working alone in the middle of the forest in Tanzania, Africa, without any scientific training. So naturally, Jane Goodall did all of those things in one go. And she ended up really redefining what it means to be human versus animal. She discovered that chimpanzees made and used tools. Previously, humans were defined as man the tool maker. And so when chimpanzees were determined to make and use tools, we had to redefine what it was to be a person versus an animal. She also learned about chimpanzee social structures, the fact that they have warfare between their communities, and also that they grieve their dead. It was a really important time for learning about animals, not only in a purely scientific context, but also what that means for our relationship with the natural world. And several years into her work, she realized exactly how endangered chimpanzees were. She began traveling the world, making this her new life mission, rather than just researching chimpanzees, telling the world about the plight of the chimpanzee and what they can do to help. She travels 300 days a year now, which is mind-boggling to me. Think about the number of hours on a plane, spreading this message about the chimpanzee's plight. In short, this woman was everything I wanted to be and still want to be. So I did my report on her. Coincidentally, this is middle school Lauren. The braces and glasses were a nice combination. Somehow I wasn't in the cool category. Can't do that. So soon after finishing the report, Jane Goodall happened to be in my state, just a few hours drive away from where I lived. And so my mom decided to encourage me to go to the lecture. I wasn't sure about it. Sitting in a lecture room for 2 hours after school ended wasn't exactly my idea of a good time. But my mom really encouraged me to go, and it was incredible. During her speech, Dr. Jane talked about how every individual matters, every individual has a role to play, and every individual makes a difference. This was true even for the young people in the audience, especially the young people in the audience. She specifically called out the next generation as not only the leaders of tomorrow, but also the leaders of today, that we could be making an influence in our regular life, even if we weren't of voting age yet. And this was such a wake-up call. After all of this time, I had been feeling disheartened about climate change, and I felt that I couldn't make a difference, but Dr. Jane was saying that I could make a difference today, not just once I turned a certain age that would have let me vote or let me become a professional full-time scientist. So that led me to my first crazy lesson in environmental work. There's no magic age for impact. You don't have to be a certain age to make a difference for your community and for your world. At that same visit, Dr. Jane had a little reception after one of her lectures. Again, I wasn't crazy about the idea of going. I was scared of meeting new people, and this smaller reception would involve talking with a lot of strangers, especially important strangers that worked for Dr. Goodall, and I was terrified. But my mom urged me to go, and urged me while there to introduce myself to Dr. Jane Goodall's staff. After a lot of convincing, I went and did it, shaking the whole way. But I found myself in a great conversation with them. They told me about Jane Goodall's youth organization, Roots and Shoots. Has anyone heard of Roots and Shoots? For a few, yes. So Roots and Shoots is this global network of youth programs that help people, animals, and the environment. It's kind of like a Girl Scout setup where there are chapters across the country and across the world, and each one of them does their own projects to help people, animals, and the environment. And so I talked with these staff people, got their support, and continued conversations with them to try and start my own Roots and Shoots group in my community. And this led me to lesson number 2. My mom especially, surround yourself with people who will take you outside your comfort zone. I didn't want to go to either the lecture or the reception afterwards that encouraged me to start my own environmental group. But having someone to help pull me out of my comfort zone a little bit, expand the edges, just a touch, really helped me get involved in environmental work to begin with. And it's hard to get outside of your own comfort zone without someone to help you along the way. So try and find those people in your life. So I did get started in environmental work. These are some photos of my Roots and Shoots group. We started off super small. I was scared to ask new people to join the group, so I got my existing friends from elementary school and the few I had made in middle school, and we started doing some small-scale environmental projects around our community. Things like handing out subsidized reusable bags, and pulling invasive species, and raising money for the animals affected by the Gulf oil spill. It was great. We felt like we were doing good things. We saw our impact, and more people were actually joining as time progressed. A few months into A few months into our program's existence, my mom stumbled across an advertisement for a $10,000 environmental grant contest. We were literally just shopping in the grocery store, and there was a sign for the Green Heroes Grant Program. It challenged people to submit their best ideas for making their home community a greener place. And the best ideas, as determined by a popular online vote, would actually get the money to make it happen. So we brought this idea back to my Roots and Shoots group, who had been doing these smaller scale environmental projects, and thought to ourselves, how can we use $10,000 to really amplify our impact, go beyond these small scale projects into something that might be a little larger, more lasting? We were a little scared to apply because we would be competing against adults. It wasn't just for young people, it was for anyone, and it was for across the country. But when I expressed these concerns to my adult mentors, they just shrugged and said, the worst they can do is say no, which was a great lesson and something that I try to take with me in my work today. I mean, the worst they can do, in this case anyway, was say no. The only thing that we had lost in applying would be our time spent on the application and any hope that we had put into it. But those commodities are renewable, thankfully. So we applied for this grant contest. As 8th graders, we were having some difficulties trying to figure out how $10,000 would be used in a single project. I had no conception of what $10,000 was. Was that like a car, a boat, like a tree? I have no idea, right? I've learned a lot since then. But we couldn't think of a single big project that we wanted to do that would use all the money. So we had decided that if we were to get this grant, we would use it to fund many smaller projects. And better yet, we would involve other people in these projects. So hypothetically, people could ask us to get money to do their small environmental projects, and we could kind of facilitate that process. My mom said that that was the basic idea of a grant program. I said 2 thumbs up, and we applied for the $10,000. A few weeks after we applied, we were absolutely floored to find out that we were semifinalists and had moved on to the online voting stage. This fate of our project was now in the hands of the internet. Scary thing, right? And we needed to convince as many people as possible to vote for our project so that we could get funded. Luckily, just as online voting began, I was put in the perfect position to do that. I had recently been accepted onto the Roots and Shoots National Youth Leadership Council, which is the youth voice into Jane Goodall's youth organization. So I sent an email out to my new council mates, these are them here, telling them about our project idea, the contest rules, and asking them to vote online. I didn't really hear any responses back, so I didn't think that went anywhere. But a few weeks later, we actually met up in person for this youth leadership retreat. As soon as I walked in the door and said my name, Kai, the person standing behind me with the very puffy hair, said, "Oh, you're Lauren. I've been voting for your project every day for the last month. And so has my mom, and my grandma, and my grandma's friend." It totally blew my mind that this person who I had never met in person was willing to go out of their way to make this project happen and just get other people involved as well. The other youth leaders in the room nodded vigorously and said that they were doing the same thing. It was crazy, which leads to number 4. People really do want to help. I've been amazed throughout all of this work as to the number of people who were willing to help when I asked for it. So your job in your project is to ask for help and be there to provide help when other people ask you for it. It goes both ways, but it's important to recognize that people do want to help as long as they know what they should be helping on. The youth leadership retreat also taught me another important lesson. Throughout the whole thing, people were focused on what they wanted to be then, not necessarily what they wanted to be when they grew up, which is all well and good, but what they wanted to be right then. And that was pretty mind-blowing for me. What do you want to be now? What do you want to accomplish now versus later? And what can you accomplish if you don't constrain yourself to waiting until you grow up to accomplish it? Again, there's no magic age for impact, and so asking yourself these sorts of questions is really important. So, thanks to these people who were very willing to help and the support of the National Youth Leadership Council, we actually got the $10,000. It was awesome and also terrifying. We quickly learned that we didn't know how to run a nonprofit as 8th graders. But thankfully, people want to help. So we reached out to a lot of community partners in trying to figure out how to run this organization. And this led me to another point. Just because you can do it alone doesn't mean you should. I spent a lot of the first few weeks of this grant process trying to figure out how to do everything on my own. And I learned a lot. I learned how to set up a website. I learned how to create grant program materials and create a whole application process. But it wasn't very good with me doing it on my own. And after seeing me accidentally delete my own website one too many times, my mom gently suggested that I involve more people in this process. And as soon as I did, everything got so much better. I stopped accidentally deleting my own website. Yes. And the new voices and perspectives that were added to the program made everything stronger. So not only did we get the youth members of our Roots and Shoots group locally involved, but we also took on some amazing adult mentors that helped us throughout the process. And we collaborated really closely with some local nonprofit organizations that had run similar programs and were able to give us some of those materials to base and build our program off of. Life just got so much better, and the program got so much stronger. So once the program was in a basic working condition, complete with a functional, non-deleted website, an application form, and a review process, we began awarding grants. We funded projects that installed reusable coolers into classrooms. We funded projects that started organic community gardens in special needs schools. Some were educational projects that went into preschool classrooms and taught them about the environment. Some were school-wide recycling programs in schools of about 5,000 people that didn't have recycling beforehand. It was all really incredible, and just hearing the ideas of the young people that were starting these projects was inspiring. We were honored to be one of the steps in making their projects happen. So in addition to involving the students leading the environmental projects, we tried to get the broader community involved. We worked hard on this. We invited our mayor to all of our grant award ceremonies. He's come to all of them that he was in town for, which is really exciting. And as he met the grantees and heard about the amazing work that they were doing for our city as a whole, he got really, really excited about the program and became a key advocate for it. He actually was the person responsible for continuing our funding once our $10,000 ran out initially. It was an awesome partnership to have with our local government, and we're so grateful that he was a part of it. We also involved local reporters and made friends with some people in our school newspapers and that sort of thing to get the word out about our programs. We wanted to make sure that the projects that the kids were running were well publicized and they were getting attention for the great work they were doing. And we reached out to some less commonly thought of partners. We wanted to get the whole community involved, so we also reached out to the local food places around us. Square Donuts was a super popular one. Who doesn't like donuts? And they're square, so why not? We always wanted to make sure that our grant awards ceremony was totally fueled by the community. So projects that were funded received snacks from our local vendors, and those vendors in turn got really excited about the program and the fact that they were supporting it. So lesson number 7 is call the mayor and also call the donut shop. So while it's amazing how much our mayor has been able to do for this program, I think it's also really important to involve the community as a whole, not just those people in high levels of power, but the people who are fueling your community in the most literal way. So as we funded more and more projects, the Carmel Green Teen Microgrant Program began to get a reputation outside of Carmel, Indiana. We began receiving awards and recognitions for our work. And as the program's founder, I was invited to a lot of really cool speaking opportunities. This is a photo of a White House panel that I gave. I was also honored to travel to speak alongside my hero, Dr. Jane Goodall, several times in Florida, Chicago, Hollywood, and beyond, really feeling like this brought my environmental work full circle. But just as all of this was happening, all of these wonderful accolades and recognition and amazing travel and speaking opportunities, I was also applying to college. This was senior year of high school, and there was an impending, really tricky decision to make. I was going to be leaving Indiana, and my friends and I had worked on building up this really community-grounded organization, and I was going to be leaving for California for school. So how would I keep it community grounded if I'm far away? And the answer was, I should step down. So after 5 years of running the program and starting it, and all of the triumph and heartbreak that went into it, I didn't really want to say goodbye to my baby, but I did. I would have been hypocritical to try to run it from afar when it was truly a community-based organization. So I made the hard decision to step down. This is a photo of me and 2 other founding board members, definitely not crying at our last award ceremony. Oops. This perhaps was the hardest lesson I had to learn. Sometimes leading means learning when to step back. That if a project is really about youth empowerment, is really about community-based leadership, if you are no longer in the community and you are no longer a youth, you should let the next generation take over. And honestly, the next generation of leaders in the Carmel Green Teen Microgrant program really rose to the occasion. The program is still running over 5 years after I left and 10 years after it started. These are all of the award ceremonies from the last 9 years, I guess. Since it was created, it's funded 50 projects, which collectively prevent over 500 tons of carbon dioxide from entering the atmosphere each year. Perhaps even more importantly, though, it's directly involved a huge percentage of the community. Almost 1,000 students have been directly involved in implementing these projects, and in a town of 80,000, that's a pretty significant percent. Nearly everyone in the community goes to parks or other places or schools that do benefit from our projects directly. And nearly every public school in the district has at least one funded project running in its school. Additionally, as I said before, the mayor has helped keep the project going after our $10,000 fizzled out. And we're super proud of these big community impact numbers, but I think it's important to also kind of scale back down to the individual. Each one of these people in the photos of our grant award ceremonies has been impacted by their environmental work in one way or the other. Some in small ways, some in bigger ways. And each of these people has learned about their potential for a small project to make important changes in the world. One of our first youth recipients said it very wisely. He was a 3rd grade Boy Scout. A small change made by small people can make a big difference. And actually, I'm going to give a little shout out. Just this morning, I actually realized, speaking of personal impacts, after the Meet the Speakers intro, Maddie Adkins came up to me from iMatter to tell me that she got a Carmel Green Teen Microgrant program when she was younger, and that was the first step in her becoming an environmental advocate. So she's working full-time at iMatter right now, doing amazing youth outreach and organization work, and I'm honored that this program could be a part of her story. So while everyone else was doing the hard work of running these grant programs, I was off at Stanford studying conservation biology. I took some inspiration from Dr. Jane and did some field biology work. I promise the prairie dog there is okay. I studied Utah prairie dogs and the impacts that plague are having on their populations and conservation. I also studied that weird little guy in the corner. It's called a Hispaniolan solenodon. It's a strange, endangered, venomous mammal that lives in the Dominican Republic. Also kind of looks like a rodent of unusual size from The Princess Bride. Not the cutest thing, but I love him a lot. So I did all of this hands-on research, and I really loved it. But I found that my favorite part was actually after the research, trying to communicate the results of my work to non-scientists, trying to take it that extra step from science into action. So I switched gears for my master's and started studying environmental communication. And I'm currently working on a children's book about the solanodon, written in English and Spanish in partnership with a conservation group in the Dominican Republic. Additionally, I'm taking my environmental communication work into NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in DC. I'm super excited to be working on a lot of their communication work, both to the general public as well as to Congress, trying to communicate the value of environmental education in our federal society. So, one of the big lessons that I learned in communication was to embrace the personal. Oftentimes in our science training, we're taught to remove yourself and your personal attitudes, behaviors, emotions from your work. And that's all well and good for science and science papers, perhaps. But when you're trying to communicate science to a broader audience, you really want to add that emotion back in. It's easy for us to, as humans, to identify with other humans and individuals rather than the stats, facts, and figures that we might usually try to communicate when we're talking science. So I want to encourage you to embrace that personal aspect and share some personal vulnerability. Tell your own story and tell the stories, amplify the stories of others who are doing similar work. All right, so reflecting back, how did I get from terrified middle schooler to currently standing in front of you and giving a long talk? A lot of it was really about learning that the talents that made me stand out weren't as important as the work that I was doing. A lot of times people talk about, find your talent and really capitalize on that, right? But to be honest, the talents that I've cultivated were more important than the talents that I naturally had. I liked quietly watching birds when I started doing this. I was terrified to talk to new people. And now I do environmental communication. And the big difference there for me was that it mattered to learn how to do that. Not that I was naturally good at it, not that I was particularly special to begin with, but that I was committed enough to the issue to learn, to change, and to grow to meet that challenge. So I want to encourage you maybe to think less about what makes you stand out and what makes you willing to stand out. So what sort of issues are you willing to take a stand on and publicly figure out how to address in your own work? So when you're moving throughout this summit, I really encourage you to think about these questions. What makes you willing to stand out? Even if you don't have those talents already cultivated, even if you don't think that you're special now, you can definitely cultivate talents independently and really make a huge impact for the world through your own work and through reaching out to other people. So with that, I'm going to encourage you to go stand out in your own communities, and I would love to take any questions.
Any questions? Come on. Okay.
I did. I definitely did consider becoming a veterinarian. There was a series of potential job opportunities that I was thinking about as a very young kid. Dolphin trainer was high up on there. Dreaming big. Veterinarian was definitely there as well, but I'm super sensitive to other creatures and their happiness and emotion, and I just didn't think I had it in me to cut one up, even if it was to help it. I'm super impressed with veterinarians and their ability to improve the health of animals, but I didn't feel that was my personal calling.
As a college student myself, excuse me, I'm getting over sickness. I'm looking into studying like wildlife biology or even things like that. What conveyed you to actually go towards a master's in communications instead of sticking with your conservation wildlife side of things that you were studying in the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of it was a combination of really enjoying the outreach and communication side of things and also being frustrated with where my science left off. A lot of times in science, especially at the college level, your goal is to publish a scientific paper. And then once you publish that paper, you're done and you move on to another project. And I realized that as I was publishing my paper about solenodons, maybe 10 people are going to read about the Hispaniola and solenodon in the Dominican Republic. Maybe. There are only like 5 of us who study it. And that 5 years of work for 10 people to read this article felt like a loss to me, and that the plight of the solenodon and of so many animals is so connected with humans that the key goal of my science was to reach out to people and to help people make a change and realize the impact that they can have on the planet. And so I switched gears from doing the science to communicating the science and letting other people do more of the primary work. Both are super, super important. My talents just fall in the second category. Yes.
How you went from this shy child to somebody who is comfortable, presumably. You look comfortable,
yeah,
standing in front and talking to crowds, but sort of what was the process?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of it was necessity. When I was working with Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots organization through their National Youth Leadership Council, and when I got invited to speak alongside Dr. Jane Goodall, that was an offer I couldn't turn down. I loved Jane Goodall and wanted to do whatever was necessary to help her and her organization and the message she was trying to get across. And the message she was trying to get across was, look at these amazing young people who are making a difference for their community. And so the first talk, I was kind of terrified and very, very shaky and couldn't really read the paper that I had written for myself to give the talk. But after that first talk, lots of people came up to me afterwards and really encouraged me and said, that was great, it was awesome to hear your story, and really positively reinforced the fact that I had gone outside of my comfort zone. And so I think that positive reinforcement was a big part, hearing both from my peers and my mentors, and also from outside or individuals, that it was worth it for me to have gone outside my comfort zone, and that next time I should do the same, continue pushing my limits bit by bit, and working towards a place where I'm comfortable in front of people and comfortable speaking my own story.
Any more questions? What are the challenges that NOAA has that you're helping them with?
Yeah, I mean, NOAA is a giant organization, a giant agency within the federal government. We have about 12,000 people. But I work for the Office of Education, which is more like 30. And so we're working on a lot of big goals, trying to get better science, oceanic and atmospheric science into the world and into the United States in particular. So I'm working a lot with our aquarium partnerships. We work with zoos and aquariums trying to get NOAA science out into the public, because informal science institutions like the Wild Center are amazing at reaching out to the public and reaching an audience that as a government agency, we might not be able to reach as effectively. So I'm working with our aquarium network to try to connect their teens across institutions and work together to boost youth and teen leadership within the aquariums and within our aquarium partnership network as a whole. I'm also working on a lot of our communication issues, so trying to figure out how, when we go up and talk to Congress about our work, how we're communicating that we're telling awesome stories of scholars that we've funded, of individual programs in places like this that have worked out fantastic, and effectively communicating the work that we're doing.
We have time for one more question.
seems like your charge to us is to be willing to stand out, and I'm wondering how you can encourage us. It seems like it's an emotional thing to reach that point, and I know for some of us it is. It's the hardest thing.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's something that I really struggled with, is coming to a place where I was willing to go outside of my comfort zone in order to do the work that I felt needed to be done. And in these, I guess one of the best ways to be willing to stand out, like you said, it's not exactly a, oh yes, I'm willing to stand out, check the box. It's an emotional thing. Is to lean on the people around you. I mean, look around the room. There are hundreds of young people who are doing incredible work, most of them locally, to help the environment. And leaning on those individuals when you're feeling uncomfortable, when you're feeling unwilling to stand out, or going at it as a group, so that you know that you're not standing out on a precipice alone, that you're really standing with the power of this entire room in the work that you're doing.
All right, let's have a round of applause for Lauren. So a couple of announcements before we split into our afternoon workshop. Well,